Now we move on to South Korea. Uncertainty surrounds refunds for U.S. tariffs following the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling, said South Korea's Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwon. Kim has added that semiconductor chips are not affected by U.S. President Donald Trump's newly imposed tariffs. President Trump has raised the tariff rate from 10% to 15% after the court struck down his previous tariff program. Meanwhile, the European Commission has firmly rejected any increase in U.S. tariffs, urging Washington to adhere to last year's trade deal terms. In response to the Supreme Court ruling, China has stated that it was making a full assessment and urged the U.S. to lift unilateral tariff measures and that violate international trade rules. Let's listen into what South Korea's Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwon has shared.
다양한 수단들을 통해 공세적으로 지속될 것으로 전망되며 글로벌 통상 환경 불확실성도 한층 높아질 것으로 예상됩니다. 정부는 국익국대화라는 원칙을 기반으로 한미 관세 합의를 통해 확보된 이 균형이 훼손되지 않고 우리 기업에게 미칠
Now for this, we welcome Mr. Colin Chong-Yu-Keat. He's a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst, joins us live from University Malaya, Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Mr. Keat, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Thank you, Suma.
Now you know that the countries are still processing the fact that the tariffs negotiations, the amendments or the changes they made in their foreign policy or their the whole effort that's gone into trade negotiations with U.S. is going down the drain after the judge's call in U.S. How do you think what comes next, and is U.S. President Donald Trump's move after even being, his previous tariffs being invalidated, and now he puts another 15%, is that valid? What are other countries supposed to take this as?
Well, I think most of the countries that have been affected, they are now trying to recalibrate. Of course, they are trying to assess the new situation, and of course to map out how much tariff power Washington still has, and after this decision by the Supreme Court, and the key point is what will happen next. And despite the ruling, we have now seen the decision also to impose a new 15% of tariff, and this implies that the U.S. is shifting from the legacy of Trump tariffs to fresh new legal vehicles, and that even if this tariff framework gets invalidated, so another one can appear very quickly, and we have seen how President Trump still has a lot of different options on the table in terms of the tariff measures, and this is precisely the risk that these countries are now reassessing, and of course they have not been rejoicing too soon in terms of this decision, and they are well aware of the future uncertainties that still remain in terms of the new tools that President Trump still has, and hence we have seen how we have seen this pause in terms of the recalibration in responses, whether it's from South Korea, whether it's from China, or whether it's from the EU. This also regards to the refund system, the uncertainty of the refund capacity for these countries, especially for South Korea. But this is more of a signal of this cash flow stress and the legal ambiguity for South Korea, and of course also it's now being trapped in this strategic hedging, depending on the U.S. market and depending on the market access for the U.S. and the importance of the U.S., but also at the same time the need also to have these fallback options, to have more friendshoring efforts in terms of economic market capacity. And of course China is trying to recalibrate, and it remains to be seen how the future options that President Trump still has, but of course they are still well aware that this is not a big setback for President Trump, and as he has stated, he has still many other legal options to consider in terms of tariff measures, and the same for the EU also. And I don't think that this will also change the transatlantic ties in a very deep way, because they have been well aware of this situation, and that I don't think this is going to be a deal breaker for these countries, knowing what is to come in the next couple of weeks from Washington.
Yes. And Mr. Kidd, how are we supposed to interpret the reaction by market? The U.S. Dollar gained momentum, became stronger. Nasdaq and S&P 500, all of them became or better. So, do you think President Trump will see these numbers and change his stance?
Well, we have seen how we all know the strength of his models and approaches in terms of his unpredictable options that he still has, and of course the leverage that he will use. And the fear is that these countries, whether they are allies or adversaries, they are fearing that of course the U.S. political system may be moving toward a semi-permanent tariff baseline, and that of course on this equation, they are well aware also on the resilience of the U.S. economy, and of course the pressure on them to adjust, and of course despite these measures, on the need to have these economic friendshoring efforts, to set up realistic guardrails. We have seen how under President Trump especially the various economic moves, whether it's tariff, whether it's sanctions or restrictions, President Trump would not let any moves or efforts by these countries to delegitimize or to harm or threaten the interests of the U.S. economy or the U.S. market as a whole. And we have seen how peace through strength, or the America First model, to protect and to jettison from this past conventional rip-off by these countries who continue to remain under President Trump's watch. And of course also the bullish run now we have seen lately for the U.S. economy, and President Trump will continue to maintain that, and this gives further leverage and strength for him to continue to use further pressure on these countries. And I will argue that these countries are well aware of that, and they will continue to consolidate with their peers, and whether it's Global South or BRICS. But we don't see yet the efficacy of these moves that will threaten the foundation of the strength of the U.S. economy, as we have pointed out, Asuma.
Yes, we will behind that. With that, I'd like to thank Mr. Keith for sharing that insight. Please stay with us. Now, looking at